Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Chad Wilson and you're watching this video because you're in ENGI 2304. In this video I want to talk about the recommendation report in general. You're already submitting your letter of intent, but you will then be working on your purpose and your background and your scope. Now the scope is one of the most important parts of the recommendation report. And I'm going to have separate videos on each of those sections, but now I want to talk about one of the parts that goes into the scope, which is your criteria. Okay, you remember the guidelines for technical writing. Guideline number 1, it's better to say more about less. Okay, so you focus. Guideline number 2, if you bring it up, you've got to explain it. So you better say more about less and not bring up something that's not in your scope, okay? Because if you bring it up, you've got to explain it. Okay, so keep those guidelines in mind. You should have had them in mind when you chose your topic. Now, when it comes to the criteria, remember, you're not writing a compare and contrast essay. You're going to compare each choice. You should have 2 choices. You're going to compare each one based on very specific criteria. And even when it comes to your criteria, it's better to say more about less. Normally people want to choose cost, environmental impact, and social change, or something like that. They want to get very broad with their criteria. And then in social impact, maybe it's the political changes, maybe it's the problems with fossil fuels. Okay, they can go all over the place and it meanders. It's better to be specific. Now, if you want the general format, it is the chapter on recommendation reports, which is chapter 8. In the 3rd edition, okay, the red one, it's on page 129. Not a feasibility report. Feasibility report where you have one choice. It's one choice or nothing. Recommendation report is where you have 2 choices and you're going to decide which one by the end. And that is key. You decide by the end. You don't tell them at the very beginning, I recommend blank, okay? The purpose of your report is not to explain why wind energy is better. That's not the purpose. The purpose is not to explain why electric cars are better. The purpose is to discuss 2 choices as you go, and then by the time we get to the end, we should know which one is better, and you're going to finally recommend one based on your criteria. Okay, now again, let's talk more specifically about the criteria. Instead of choosing something big, you can get very specific. Okay, even when it comes to environmental impact, that is very broad. It's often difficult to know exactly what the environmental impact is. Think about what environmental impact encompasses. Okay, if you're talking about the environmental impact of an electric car, we tend to think it's just the emissions at the point of use. Meaning, when I drive it, it doesn't put out any pollution. Okay, not that I own a Tesla or anything. I wish I did. But when I drive it, at the point of use, it doesn't put out pollution. Okay? But wouldn't it be better to talk about emissions rather than environmental impact? Because environmental impact would be, what about mining the batteries? Where are those batteries mined? What does the process of mining entail? Not that you mine battery, lithium, mining the lithium. Mining batteries, what the heck? Mining the lithium. Where is it mined? And what is that process? How much pollution is put out? Or what is the environmental impact of the mining itself? Then, what about the process of making the car? Okay, because there's a lot of energy that goes into making that car. What about the process to change the lithium to make battery out of it? What about that process? Even with hydrogen vehicles, what about the process to create the hydrogen or to split to get hydrogen? Okay, that process requires energy. How much energy does it require? Using energy means it has an environmental impact. Okay, so it's better, if you want to talk about environmental impact, it would be better to instead say, we're only going to talk about emissions at the point of use. You see how we're saying more about less. We're only going to talk about emissions at the point of use because you may not be able to get the data for all that other stuff. And then what about when the car is no longer useful? What happens to the batteries? How do you recycle them? How much energy does that take? What about the rest of the car? How much energy does it take to recycle it? Okay, same with the hydrogen car. So, focus. With the, I think it's sometimes better to focus on economics or cost. But even there, I wouldn't make cost a criteria because that's broad. Because think about the cost of a car. It's not just the purchase price. That's what we think. Okay, now it really doesn't matter the cost of to make the car. Okay, that doesn't matter. What we're really talking about is for consumers. So yes, purchase price is one part. How much does it cost to get an electric car? Now remember, if you're comparing an electric car and a hydrogen car, you want them to be similar. Okay, I had a student one time try to compare a Tesla with a Honda Civic and said, hey, the Civic is cheaper, therefore buy the Civic. No. Those aren't comparable. Okay? Tesla is more of a luxury vehicle. If you want to compare a Tesla, maybe you compare it to a Lexus. All right, or some other, I'm just choosing examples. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So when it comes to cost, purchase price is important. So yes, a consumer will want to know, is an electric car cheaper or is a hydrogen vehicle cheaper? But that's not where cost ends. Okay, so maybe purchase price is one criteria. And you know exactly what data you need, right? You should be able to see the criteria and know exactly what data you need. And then the point is to find that data. Find the data through credible sources. So, purchase price would be one aspect of cost. But then what about maintenance cost? Yeah, what about maintenance? And you might need to choose a lifespan of the car. Maybe you're going to say someone's going to keep this car for 10 years. Maybe only 5 years. Maybe they're going to lease it and it's only a 4-year period. I don't know. Whatever you choose, you might want to have an ending period because at some point those batteries have to be replaced. And does replacing those batteries mean that that electric car now becomes a lot more expensive? Okay? So you need to think about things like that. You want to have, maybe in your scope, you're going to talk about over a 10-year period. So purchase price may be one, but then you're going to have maintenance cost. And then what about depreciation? And by depreciation, all I mean is how much does the value does the car lose in the period you specified? So maybe an electric car, maybe a Tesla loses 75% of its value in 10 years, but this Toyota Mirai, I think that's the Toyota hydrogen vehicle, maybe it loses 80%. Okay, you may not know yet because the car may not be that old. You don't know exactly what its depreciation is going to be. So you may say, well, you can't actually judge that. All right, and then maybe you won't be able to choose depreciation. But you can see the point that you can limit your criteria, and that's important. All right, so when you write your recommendation report, when you're thinking about your criteria, don't start broad. focus. Focus. And keep in mind that with your recommendation report, you're going to want about 10 pages from introduction to conclusion. Okay, so not all the front matter, not your title page, not your bibliography, not all that stuff. From introduction to conclusion should be about 10 pages, including all your data, including your figures and tables. All right? Okay, good luck.